why deep tech startups need patents or their intellectual property, not only to survive, but also thrive and scale and grow. So that's really the focus. And I will start with some broad questions for my panelists. So thank you very much for joining. Just to set the stage, I'd like, maybe we'll start with Manoj and then we'll go in this direction. How would you describe the current state of innovation in deep tech and critical technologies in India? And what kind of progress do you think we've made so far?
Okay. Namaste and hello everyone. Nice to be in this August audience. My assessment would be that we have started well, and but we need to gain momentum very soon. And when we talk about deep tech, we are talking about things like semicon, we are talking about cybersecurity, we are talking about all these future technologies which are high risk and high return in nature. And therefore, I think they need a lot of hand-holding. It's very promising to see that in deep tech, we have close to around 4,000 startups. I think that's what in India, which is a nice big move. But I think this number should be in the range of 50,000, 60,000. I say this because the gestation period in deep tech is normally very risky and very long-term in nature. So the other thing which is very nice to see is the government support. I think the setting up of the RDI fund recently by the government, and a portion of that is focused on deep tech. That's a very good sign. The second sign is the setting up of an organization called ANRF, which again is ANRF, Anusandhan National Research Foundation, which is again very nice. I mean, the idea is to set up the overall ecosystem to support these startups, specifically in the deep tech. So these are two very nice things. But you would also like to see a little bit more focus on the skilling part, and specifically in the deep tech. So although India generates something like 2 million engineers every year, but we need a little bit of more investment into deep tech. And I think that's, so I would say to conclude that the starting is good, but we need to really build up on the momentums.
Right. Thank you, Manoj. Dr. Malathi.
Yeah, thanks, Ashish, and for inviting us. And thanks for the panel. Yeah, like you said, about 4,000. I did a little more, 5,500. But
If you
big difference.
could bring the microphone.
Yeah, it doesn't make big difference. But and it's in nice, you have different types of deep tech. It could be quantum. It could be aerospace. What I see a lot of startups in the aerospace, which we would not have seen 5 years back. And also in quantum, semiconductors, defense, which the government of India has opened up. One of the ANRF, of course, is going to invest about 1 lakh crores, which I think is also a great thing. And it could be a significant player, especially trying to bridge the gap. And the gap, I mean, can be on infrastructure, but it can also be on funding. Why do I say that? Because in India, about 0.5 to 0.6% of the GDP we spend on R&D. But if you compare countries like US, China, Germany, where it's all about 2.4 or 2.5 or 3, and therefore I think more investment and more funding is required for us to see really breakthrough technologies happening. With this type of funding, I don't think we can do too much, but we really need. I think that is one of the things. And then the key drivers could be like information technology. Not just ITES, but if we can have products being made in quantum and AI, if we can do. And we've seen, like in biotech, it is like CRISPR-Cas technologies, whether we can do. But more important is in the hardware innovation, if we can do. And I'm seeing several companies, startups wanting to get into that as well. We've been traditionally into ITES, but I think a lot of companies now want to get into the product area as well. What I'm seeing with the emerging opportunities is more product innovation focus, technology ownership, having IP for that. And it could be like IP-driven value creation that people are looking. And now people are not looking only at India market, but the global market as well. And I see some of the leading institutes like IIT Madras, I see BITS Pilani here, IIT Hyderabad, IIT Bombay, And a lot of other IITs mainly are venturing into some risk type of inventions where they're going out of their comfort space and trying to invent and do that. I think, but a lot of funding, and we should be patient because we need funding for 8 to 10 years before you really come up with some great technology. So that is what I would say.
Thank you. Julie, how does Qualcomm see the Indian innovation landscape, deep tech in particular?
Yes, thanks, Ashish, for inviting me to participate in the panel. I think I would agree with Manoj at the start that we at Qualcomm do see a lot of promise in India's deep tech ecosystem. So folks may not be aware, but Qualcomm has been incubating deep tech startups in India for 9 years now. And in that time, we've mentored around 150 different startups. About 30% of them have been women-led startups. These startups have applied for more than 650 patents globally, and Indian patents representing about 4% of all Indian startup patents. So I think, as Manoj said, I think that we're off to a really good start. It's not only the case, though, that these startups have just applied for these patents and been granted these patents, but these startups have also been very successfully commercially, which is also a second piece of developing the ecosystem. So the startups we've mentored have raised $325 million in capital, and a quarter of that from advanced funding stages, so A, B rounds, exits. More than 50% of the startups we've worked with are shipping in commercial volumes. We've also had 4 of our startups be recipients of the PLI, DLI semiconductor funding schemes. And so all in all, I think we've seen a lot of success with the startups we've incubated. So I think the ecosystem is really off to a good start.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie. Professor Rao, your thoughts?
Thank you. I think India is now beginning to file lots of patents. We are ranked 6th in the world now, and we are also growing in double digits when it comes to patenting. And in India, oftentimes what happens is now we swing between two extremes. There was a time when we were not filing enough patents. Now our problem is we are filing too many patents. So now the question is the balance lies somewhere in between. And so these too many patents have also led to all kinds of frauds now in the patenting system, and I think a lot of those things also need to be fixed. And but there are also good quality patents being filed now. I think people are also becoming wiser. But I think in academic institutions, I would think not more than 3 to 4% of patents we file are getting commercialized. I mean, that commercialization strategy is still in its infancy. While people have figured out how to file patents, how to even get them granted, but they aren't really there yet when it comes to commercializing the IP, and that is where institutions are, beginning to struggle right now. But I think, this is a problem of plenty. I mean, too many patents. So I think if we are able to commercialize even 15-20% of them, I think there will be lots of good quality deep tech startups coming out of that. I think I have views on how to do that. Very often the general tendency is you file a patent and then wait for someone to come and license it and give you money. So that's a very simplistic model that has not worked anywhere in the world. Even in Stanford, for example, if you see sitting in the middle of Silicon Valley, last year if you look at their data and all that, less than 1% of their revenue came from patent licensing, less than 1% at a place like Stanford. And MIT is no better. MIT is about 0.8%, Stanford is 0.67%. That's all the revenues one earns by licensing of the patents. But the same Stanford and MIT, the way they monetize the patents is to startups. Out of these patents, you create now, startups, and these startups grow big, and then they are valued very high, and then industries come fund them, and then you take it higher. And Stanford created startups, through these patents, have created a wealth of $3 trillion in the US, one university. I think India has to, follow some of these commercialization or monetization policies rather than waiting for someone to come and, license your IP. I think we need to encourage more and more deep tech entrepreneurship system. I think that still needs to be nurtured. We are not there yet, when it comes to deep tech startups. I think, some of these we will discuss maybe in the second round.
Yes. So basically, we have seen the life of an innovative idea from R&D to creating something new, effective, which can result in intellectual property, filing for patents, trademarks, and other forms of IP rights, getting examination done in a timely manner, getting your patent granted. It has to pass muster with the subject area experts. And then comes the very important stage of what to do with those patents. Are you going to use it for defensive purposes so that someone else doesn't kind of free ride on that idea? Are you going to use it more productively, monetize it, commercialize it in a timely manner? So that's the entire lifeline of an idea. Where I want to go back now is where Professor Rao ended by saying that we still need to focus on that last bit, which is very crucial for India. How do startups, how can they leverage IP and commercialize it meaningfully? Because sometimes it's a problem of disciplinary mismatch also. Engineers, I should not be saying this in a public forum, but engineers are not the ones who do the prosecution of patents. The lawyers may not have the kind of technical background. So there is a bit of disciplinary diversity which needs to come into sync. So, Julie, how can we overcome this challenge of slightly low rate of commercialization of IP in young enterprises?
So maybe I'll take your question in a slightly different direction. And I know Dr. Rao has talked about, we've gotten this idea of we need to get patents, India needs to get patents, and we've sort of solved that problem. But I think a part of the commercialization piece that I don't hear talked about very much is the importance of robust, reliable patent rights. So it's not enough to have the patent, but in order to commercialize that patent needs to be enforceable, right? So you need to be able to exclude other people from practicing your invention, or if you want to license that invention, that license has to have some meaning. And so I think the thing that I would emphasize for commercialization is making sure that India continues to have a robust, reliable system of patent protection. And as an economist, like the economics literature is very clear here on the importance of patents for startup funding. So one study I've seen notes that a first patent for a startup increases the chances of securing funding by 47%, securing a loan by 76%, getting funding through public investors through an IPO by 128%. This is really, really critically important. You could take the recent experience of the US, where we've had a number of court decisions over the last 20 years, which has actually weakened the reliability of patent rights in the United States. We see VC funders less interested in those technology spaces where patent eligibility has become more questionable because of court action. We see less exclusive licensing, where it's harder to get an injunction now because of some court decisions in the US. So I think a really key piece to commercialization is making sure that we continue in India to have a system of strong, robust patent rights. And I think for the most part, what I've seen from the Indian courts is that they're largely getting this right. The decisions coming out of the Indian court system seem to be well balanced. And there's granting of injunctions, there's pro tem security deposits. I think one area where maybe the courts could be a little better, is come into decisions a little bit more quickly.
Okay.
But all in all, I think it's in a good place, and I think that's a key part of solving this commercialization question.
Thanks, Julie. Dr. Malti, you would agree that we need to expedite our justice delivery system? That's a no-brainer. We have to. But I want to ask you, what's the level of awareness and expertise in our legal profession when it comes to understanding technologies and the other way around as well? What kind of awareness of the IP system do our engineers need, and is it lacking? Do you see a confluence here?
Yeah. I will just, I just want to take on what Dr. Rao said, is we aren't having a lot of patents in India filed by startups and institutes, individuals. I think IP awareness in several sectors is required. But because you're talking about IP, I think a lot of awareness is required. One, an engineer. I know when I want to hire engineers, they always say, what is an engineer going to do in a law firm? And they feel very, very uneasy. And they say, no, we don't. So we have to really convince them. And similarly, when I go and talk to engineers in IITs and others, we are more interested in publication, having students. And so there's a lot of awareness that we need. One, IP awareness. So people think as long as I write something and get a patent, and then I can go and talk to everybody, I've got a patent. But actually, when you see, like, very few patents get commercialized, many of them don't understand that you need to actually disclose your invention to get a monopoly right for that. The other thing is, I see people don't understand what is freedom to operate. Many times they say, I have a patent and therefore I have a right to do it. And so we need to actually train them, make them aware that what is the patenting right? It's a negative right. How can I use it to stop others, but not necessarily that I can use it? What I always see that if I look at the pharma, the generic pharma versus the engineering, the generic pharma industry or the pharma industry, you go and talk to them about IP, they know everything. They know how to kill or get a patent revoked, which is coming in their way, because they want to make those medicines, they want to make the drug. But the same thing when I talk to an engineering company or engineers, they're just not aware, they don't know the value of IP. And so IP is very good because not only it gives you a sort of a landscape that what type of work I can do, how do I get a patent, go to the venture capital and try to get funding for it, how do I value my company by using IP? So it's just not the paper, but using that, can I commercialize it? Can I make products out of it? And can I sell it? And there we also feel, many of them say, oh, I need a US patent. And so I know definitely we need India patent, but then we keep asking them, why would you file in the important jurisdiction? Where is the value that you get? So a lot of awareness has to be done in every sector. And like we say, okay, people are filing now, but I think people will get mature. And after some time, you will see that they are getting quality patents are being filed because they'll burn their hands by having these patents which don't have value.
Right. No, so this is quite established in the literature that if one were to plot a graph for quality of IP, it's highly skewed on the right-hand side, meaning that there are several low-quality patents that are out there, and the high-quality patents are very few. You're waiting for those. That's where the value really lies. Let me bring in Manoj here. How do we address the issue which all speakers have talked about of quality of patents? What is your take?
I can share my experience of Nokia. So I'm sure most of you would have heard about Ben Labs. Ben Labs is a huge researcher. We have got 10 Nobel Prizes. And it all starts with the culture. I mean, when we are trying to do inventions and therefore patents, etc., we basically asked ourselves two very basic questions. That is this technology going to serve the humankind? Does it actually have the business case? And only then actually we decide to do more intense research and therefore IPRs and all those things. So those basic filters are something which we have to apply. Now, as Nokia, you'll be surprised to know that in the 25 years, we have invested 150 billion euros in the R&D, which is huge. I mean, at an average of something like 6 billion per year, which is enormous. As a percentage of sales, it comes to around 20%. So 20% of our top, and I'm not talking about the bottom line, I'm talking only in terms of the revenue, is going into research. So it's very fair to assume that all this will be monetized. I mean, if we are creating the technologies, a fair ROI is the expectation of having a fair ROI is pretty obvious. So therefore, my solution would be, and I completely agree with all the three panelists, is that when we are talking to a startup, we should not be only focusing on the technology. We should not be only talking about the business case. There is the third very important aspect, which is the business ethics. And I say this because, moment you file for the patents, it becomes open. It's there for public to see. And they can actually use these patents in their products. And business ethics says that if you're using my technology, it's very fair to expect that, they give a fair share. I mean, they should actually enter into a license agreement, etc. And once we do that, once we sort this out, we don't have to rely too much on the system. I mean, the system has to be fair. I mean, so that's my submission in general.
Right.
If we do all these, so first part is the filtering in terms of having the right IPRs. The second is to be very fair to everyone in the ecosystem, that the technologies which we are creating, they should be fairly well compensated.
Right. So, Professor Rao, you talked about quality of patents. You also talked about universities, academic institutions, including BITS, encouraging researchers, students, faculty to file for patents. But how is the licensing part being explained to students? Because I think the challenges that a big technology company might face around the licensing framework will be very different for these young deep tech entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think it's still a problem. For example, India, if you look at the IP-based unicorns today, out of our roughly 120 unicorns or so, they are less than 5% of them. Less than 5% of our unicorns are actually based on an IP. So that ecosystem needs to develop. So I think, to me, filing patents, I think that problem we have fixed now. So I think there are lots of patents being filed. The quality of patents, I think that we need to still work upon. I mean, that there is still scope to improve. But licensing, we are just beginning. I mean, any IIT you look at, IIT Delhi or BITS Pilani, I think how much money you make out of licensing of a patent? 50 lakhs, 1 crore, that's it. I mean, I think the return on investment on filing of patents is pretty poor. I think the only people who are making money are the lawyers right now. Other than that, no one is making money out of these patents. But out of these patents have come a lot of startups. I think without those patents, all those hundreds of startups that we have in these institutions wouldn't have happened. So I see that some of these startups making it big, and they couldn't have, started a company without that IP. That was a prerequisite, and because nobody would have funded them if they did not even own the IP on what they are trying to do. So that way, patents are very essential, and they have been able to start a company. But I think the incubation time is pretty long still. My startup, I started NanoSniff in 2011, and we were able to commercialize the first product, which is there in all airports now for explosive detection. It took us full 10 years, right? And then there was, in the process of finding money, the investors, there was so much of dilution of equity that by the time we launched our first product, it was pretty not a great kind of a shape. And now things have become better because government of India is now, giving a lot of grants. When I started, there were no grants. Everything was you go to an investor and then you dilute equity to receive funding. So one thing which the government is doing well now, though they are not giving too much of money, but there are too much of bureaucratic hurdles now in the government grants to startups. But at least if you know where to approach, how to approach, there are still some grants available right now. So that's one thing. But I think the licensing, we are, the biggest challenge in this country is the academia industry collaboration, right? We have never been able to, develop or forge a kind of a healthy collaboration between academia and industry. In fact, as per the recent rankings, India ranks 86th today among some 130 countries when it comes to academia industry collaborations. That has not happened at all. So therefore, industry coming and taking a patent from academia and licensing it is happens once in 10 years or so. It's not a very common sight to see in any of our institutions. But I believe that, we are in the India Mobile Congress, right? Everybody talks about how India skipped the landline generation, went directly to mobile generation, right? The penetration of mobile phones is so good, but landline we never even got started properly, right? And the same thing should happen with academia industry collaborations. I don't think India will ever have very strong academia industry collaborations, but startups can play a role. Startups can act as a bridge between academia, startup and industry. So I think we might eventually skip the academia industry collaboration route and we might get into academia startup industry route, which could be a new model for India. And that could also be one good way to commercialize the IP, because industry now investing in startups because they speak a language which is similar to an industry rather than academia. So I think startups can act as a great bridge now between academia and industry. That is a new model India needs to work upon and perfect that, so that that conventional or the major problem we had been bringing academia industry closer, probably our startups might solve it.
So, excellent point. Julie.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit more on the quality question that you raised, Ashish. So I would 100% agree with everything Manoj said. And also add that I really feel like quality is something that the market can sort out, right? So if you think about licensing, right, if you go to the market with patents that aren't valuable in the sense, right, they're not, maybe foundational technologies or only minor improvements, right? Potential licensees aren't going to find those technologies very valuable, aren't going to pay very much for them. And so there's going to be not very much of an incentive to be patenting those types of inventions. Just to emphasize that commercialization also does not only mean licensing. And so if you think about, well, I'm going to, put my invention into some product or service, again, if it's a low quality invention, your product or service is not also going to be very valuable, and therefore it's not going to make sense to, put a lot of resources in. So I think, I don't think that India necessarily needs some kind of, top-down or kind of heavy-handed approach to improving patent quality. I feel like this is something that over time the market will help to address.
Is that something we should let the market decide, or can something be done more proactively to ensure that good, high-quality IP is churned out of the system?
Yeah, I would think I would agree with what Professor Rao. I worked with him in IIT Delhi when we were part of the FIT. I've also worked with the IIT Madras director. What I feel is that it's very difficult for people to really understand what's quality of a patent. They feel that their invention that they've done is great. With this awareness, once they know, they go to the market and test in the market. Is anybody going to come and pay for it or license their technology, or they can assign it or sell it? That's the time they'll understand the value of IP or the value or the quality of their patent. Today, what Dr. Rao said is that the startups are great, and some of the startups who have done well have understood the game of IP. It's not that they're able to get money only by talking. Because today the venture funds or anytime, even if you go to BIRAC, they ask you, do you have an IP? And now they're asking questions like, do you have freedom to operate? What are the technologies that you can cover? And so on. So people have become aware. Of course, we need more like what Stanford and Broad Institute does is surrogate licensing, have a startup company, the academia, and then the startup come there. So they have, if you look at Jennifer Doudna or Feng Zhang, because I work in CRISPR, they've all started a startup within the university system. And the startup then becomes a bridge between the big company and the academia. So I think that's a very good message that Dr. Rao talks about. But how do I go about licensing? And can the government of India really help them want to bring about the awareness and also to see, can I bring about a collaboration between, the investors and the startups? Some of them I do see that they do work well. I've worked also with IIT Madras. There seems to be a lot of startups within the IITs, and that awareness has grown up very much, and it is much better now. So I think a lot of awareness. Why IP? Am I doing defensive patenting? Am I doing offensive patenting? So a lot of people who come to say, I want to patent, the first thing we ask, why patent? But many of them, if you look at the academia or you look up institutes, one of the tick boxes that they have to is, how many patents do you have? And they get their promotion recently, not on the papers which has impact factor, but how many patents do you have? So many professors, many of them come to me and say, I need 5 patents this year, period. So we should stop this. It's not how much patents you have, but how much you can license. Where do you think you can talk to an industry on this? And then the goal will get better. They'll know that my thing is not just a paper patent, but something with which I can license and so on. So I think it will improve and so on.
And it has started to come up in conversations which wasn't happening 4, 5, 6 years ago. Very popular shows like Shark Tank in the US. We have an Indian version of it as well. One question almost always comes up, which is, do you hold any IP on this idea for which you're asking for funding? So I think it's changing, but I'm still I'm wondering how can the government in any way other than funding intervene here, because it's a purely market-driven process. Something is useful only because someone can derive value out of it. That's what that makes the idea, the IP, valuable. All the metrics otherwise are quite they generate mixed results on citations and licensing revenues. But I'm still wondering, Professor Rao, if should government really be playing a role in this completely private and market intensive activity?
I think the government should stay away from the patenting thing. One good thing that has happened is they have fixed the patenting process. 5 years ago or 6 years ago, Indian patents would never come. 10 years, 12 years. Now I think they are 2 years, 3 years. Even the quality of examination has gone up. So things are getting better. I think beyond that, I still say ministries, right? I shudder to think sometimes what happens to those patents where ministries try to hold on to a patent. If I have funded you, right, now you need to take my permission to license the patent. The moment you say something like that, it's dead end. Nothing will happen, right? Now, one problem we are seeing is academic institutions. In India, as a policy, all patents our students and faculty file are owned by the institute, not by the inventor, right? So you, at the end of the day, need to still go to the dean, corresponding dean, and negotiate if you want to license the technology. Progressive institutions have policy where if I start a company, I can easily license the patent. They would hold equity, of course. All institutions take some equity, in all the startups that we incubate in an academic institute. And if I am licensing more and more patents, which are my own patents, but the institute owns them, they take more equity, right? But just for incubation, if it is 1% of equity, if I am licensing many of my patents out of the institute, I sometimes go up to 3%, 4%, 5%, depends on the university that you are negotiating with. So that is still a hurdle. I think this process, at least in IITs, IISc, BITS, Pilani kind of institutions, still works. In universities, there is no chance. In universities, people are filing patents. Nobody knows what happens to these patents. They don't even have any processes in place, where they can license and all of that. We have completely neglected the university system, even faculty entrepreneurship, right? In IITs, in BITS, Pilani, almost every fifth or sixth faculty member today has a startup, right? In a university system, it's unthinkable right now. UGC, our agency, was trying to form a policy for university faculty to start entrepreneurship, to start companies, but nothing has happened. There are hardly any universities, but I'm talking of primarily the public funded universities, the state universities, where there are not even policies that exist for a faculty member to start a company. There is a direct conflict of interest and other kinds of things. So some of these we need to overcome. Another major problem is the PhD. The way the PhD programs are structured in our universities. All our PhD programs today, if you look at, are all producing or training grounds for university professors, right? You do PhD, to become a university professor. That is the typical kind of a mindset that everybody comes up with. But PhD is not to become a university professor. In US, for example, just about 10% of PhDs, go for academic jobs. The 90%, 80% go for industry jobs. They even do startups because now they are experts in certain area. They can do that. I think India needs to also, reinvent its PhD programs. In BITS Pilani, as you are aware, we started a PhD program where we are saying at the end of 4 years, right, you start a company. That your outcome of a PhD is not a list of publications. The outcome of your PhD is, are you able to start a company? Have you developed a prototype, which can be demonstrated? And so therefore you don't start at a basic research for the PhD. You start at TRL 2-3 where a proof of concept is done. In 4 years of time, you take it to a prototype or a product. You start a company and commercialize. So we are beginning to now reorient our PhD programs more towards startup incubation. I think that needs to happen on a larger scale in the country, because for deep tech startups, academia is the best bet still, right? That is where a lot of new knowledge is getting generated. If we can fix that process through what I call the academia startup industry kind of a collaboration, there is a lot of potential in this country, for some very good startups to come out of our academic institutions.
Right. But it's outside India, a lot of countries, including the US, they've managed to get this part right. So it's a solved problem in a global context. Would you agree that it?
Yeah, no, I was just agree with everything that Dr. Rao has said, and that's the thing. I think maybe the missing link is this kind of robust tech transfer ecosystem at the universities, right? So if you think about in the U.S., right, most major universities are going to have a tech transfer office, right, where they're both working with their faculty to develop patents, but then also looking for opportunities to get those patents licensed outside of the university. And I think you're starting to see some of this in India. So there's this National Biopharma Mission, which has started working in the biotech space to get professionals trained in tech transfer accreditation so that they can then kind of go and set up these kinds of programs. But I do agree with Dr. Rao that that's kind of the missing piece, right? You do need to get these patents out of the universities and into the market.
Right. Manoj, would you like to share some thoughts on how Nokia is a European company, how Europe has approached bridging the divide between industry, academia.
I think we firmly believe, and very rightly outlined by Dr. Rao and my Qualcomm friend, the industry and academia collaboration has to be super strong. It will lead to good quality of patents, like we already know, because I mentioned about the two filters. The business case you would have already addressed, and it will lead to a good quality of patent anyways. So the academic collaboration is going to be massive. We believe very strongly, I mean, globally, we have tie-up with all the leading universities in US. If we talk about India, then we have an academic collaboration with Indian Institute of Science, IITs, IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay for cybersecurity, all the deep tech, going forward, the next generation hardware research. So we firmly believe that till the time we have a strong industry-academia collaboration, we cannot proceed. Otherwise, you'll end up actually doing research in an area where you neither have the returns and you'll only be just wasting your funds.
Right. Is there, I would like, because there's so much of collective experience here across business sectors and across disciplines, I'd like you to share with the audience any use case, any interesting example where a deep tech startup or any startup was able to meaningfully utilize the IP system. Any success story that comes to mind?
Among the startups that Qualcomm has incubated, we have lots of success stories. Maybe I'll just focus on one. One is a company that we incubated called Durugo Diagnostics, and they're a healthcare startup, and they've got more than 50 patents now. They invented a device. I think this is super interesting. They invented a device that uses uses laser measurements and an AI algorithm to detect different types of bacteria in a wound and then predict what antibiotic would be most effective to treat that specific bacteria. They've been really successful. They have distribution of their device both in India and the United States. They've gotten FDA approval in the US for their device. So to me, this is like a clear example of a kind of a deep tech startup using the IP system to come up with something really innovative and meaningful and impactful to improving quality of life for
Right.
across the world.
Right. Any examples come to mind?
Yeah, I know. So just to say that I think a lot of time you need the ecosystem. If you have a very good ecosystem, we've seen people hear about it. And so one of the things I've really been happy with is a venture center in Pune. Why? Because of course I've been an NCL alumni, I did my PhD there, so I do have connections. But then they have several startups who have made, funding for more than 5 million to 10 million. So it could be there is this flight base which is got for drones of they have about 156 million. We have MyLab Diagnostics, which became famous during COVID, and they have more than 10 million. Then you have Amu, which is a second use for a known drug. They've got more than 5 million. C6 Energy, which works on seaweed. CCamp is another very good incubator centers where there are many people who get a huge amount of funding, Series A, Series B, and so on. Then there's BioPrime. In IIT Madras, you have Adeo, and in Segenica, Remedio, and Achira from Bangalore. I can name because I do a lot of biotech, and between the biotech diagnostics, I can name at least 20 companies who are startups based on their IP have got more than 10 million. These are all companies who have got more than 10 million. And that, that noise, hearing, oh my, another incubator has got this much money, they know how to go and pitch for it. Just writing a business plan, how do I pitch for it? What do I pitch for it? They've become very good. I think an ecosystem is required where hand-holding happens, IP is help, they help the IP. And then you see my friends making money, so why not I?
Professor Rao, before I invite you to share some success stories from BITS or IITs, I want to share with everyone here that please visit, if you have some extra time, the academic block of IMC, which is in that corner. And some wonderful projects are on display by students. It will motivate them if you go talk to them, ask them, well, why are they doing this? What is the use case for it? What problem are you trying to solve? It can be very, very motivating to them. So please spare some time. BITS Pilani also has a booth. It's number 6, close to a cafe. So that was a little plug-in. You know, when you're watching a YouTube video and suddenly you get an ad which you cannot get rid of, it was that. Anyway, with that, let me invite Professor Rao to share some success.
So I think there are many success stories behind every deep tech startup. There are patents and they have been able to commercialize. But like I was mentioning, less than or just about 5% of our unicorns are based on an IP. So if you are saying success story in terms of building a unicorn, I think very few, right? Now 5% of them. But if you talk about success story where you used an IP and got the product into the market and you have been able to build some business around that, with 20 people, 30 people, there are plenty of them now. So that is happening, but there are many challenges in this country. You find a patent, you spent a lot of time and even money to build a prototype, right? You tested it, you got all the certifications, you launched the product, right? And then the real challenge begins, right? The scale up is not very easy in India. I have a startup which sells explosive detectors to airports. Now, how do you sell an explosive detector to airport, right? Where the decisions are made by those security personnel, right? And we are competing with large companies like Smith and some of them, right? And there are very well-established channels for all these agencies to procure those items today. Now, suddenly a startup comes and sells something which is as good as what they are manufacturing based on a totally different platform, a micro sensor platform, patented in India, patented in the Europe, US and all that. All that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the security guy who is buying your technology needs to be convinced why he would not buy a Smith system and would buy a startup system. That I can tell you is a $1 billion problem. If you can crack that, you can build a $1 billion company today. And even in healthcare, getting ICMR approvals, right? When in IIT Delhi during COVID, we launched a low-cost RT-PCR, right? I mean, that was a disruptive technology in that space. But ICMR, getting ICMR even gave the approval, right? But then they have to do certain things so that the state governments would procure this. And that I can tell you is not very easy. So India, I think one of the reasons why you don't see too many unicorns in the startup space is our procurement policies. On the paper, all of that is fixed by government, but in practice, it is a completely broken system. If you have made a technology, made a product, and if you are competing with large companies, it's not easy at all today to reach out to those people and scale those numbers. And that procurement kind of aspects, if we can fix in the country, I think India's problem is more than self-reliance or any other thing, self-confidence. Many of these guys who are procuring have no confidence on anything that is done in India, right? They want to see some foreign name there. I think that self-confidence levels are still very low. While we are confident that we can develop, the guys who are procuring are not at all confident that anything which is Indian, they would like to go ahead and put their bets on. So that is something, that self-confidence problem we need to still address in the country.
Thank you. That's a very, very valid point. I have one closing question, because the theme of this Congress, India Mobile Congress, is Innovate to Transform. So I'll pose one question, same for all the panelists. What is that one transformative idea which you'd like to see get actioned and implemented as soon as possible? Just one. A lot of new ideas have been shared already by all of you, but let's assume that people who can execute can have the resources are listening to you right now, and they will take your idea forward. What would you recommend, Manoj?
Yeah, I think a very simple idea could be to have a IP exchange in India, a platform where you bring in the technology creators, technology users. So, I mean, we talk about digitalization in such a big way. So, a simple IP India-based exchange can be something which could solve multiple of the problems which we discussed. I think that could be a very simple idea to begin with.
That's quite noble. Dr. Malti.
Yeah, I think one big thing that I would like is an awareness program and a tech transfer department in every university, which is very well aware. And they should have confidence, like he said, confidence in the technology. Because if you have a nodal person, they teach you awareness, they also can be a
do that, right? But CSIR labs are more like academia than industry. So India lacks those institutions right now. I actually made proposals to government, and we are trying to create one as a sensor hub where you hire people with manufacturing expertise, certification, all of that is required to go from TRL 3.4 to TRL 7.8, right? And so they look at the prototypes and they then take it to that higher level and then, license it to industries and all of that. I think we need to create those institutions. Unless we create that, everybody is struggling right now in that valley of death. I think that's a very valid point. Things are moving forward. Hopefully it will happen sooner or later.
I think the government should fund that, especially in the MedTech base, for making prototypes, for testing and all that. There are some centers coming up in Bangalore, but I think we need hundreds and thousands of those, not just one.
Right. We have 5-6 minutes left, so if you can ask a question.
Yeah.
Slightly more. Yeah.
So I'm a graduate from BITS Pilani, and I'm running my startup now. I graduated in 2012. So I am trying to file patents for my MedTech startup. But I find that to file the patents, you need funds. And to get funds, they ask for patent. How to come out of this catch-22 system?
No, but patent is not very expensive, and there are facilitators. And if you say you're a startup, it's pretty cheap. And especially the government has reduced the official fees to 1/4, and that is why you see it is there. Government is helping. So if you're somewhere in Bangalore, Karnataka, government is helping. There are many governments which are helping 100% to fund for patent. And there are many law firms, many people who come out to help. So if you say you're a startup and you have a good this, I don't think it is difficult. You go and look around, you will be able to identify that. Otherwise, we can help.
Thank you.
Anyone wants to comment on that? Thank you. By the way, just for that was completely unexpected. We didn't ask you to ask that question. Go ahead, please.
Hello. First of all, thank you for such a session. Very informative and very well managed. I have a simple question. Like for industries, for the deep tech industry, I was thinking there was a moment in 2014, when Tesla released all their patents to the public, so that the other giants or other competitors in the industry can catch up and develop the technology further. Do you see such a movement in the deep tech industry now or in the coming future? If yes, why? And if no, why?
So the Tesla opened up their patent portfolio about 10 years ago.
Yes.
Is that something that can be expected in the deep tech space globally or in India? Maybe I have a different take on it. I'll come back to it later. Julie?
My gut says no. I think it's an issue, right, that particularly in deep tech and in these critical and emerging technologies, right, R&D is very expensive, right, and very risky, right? There's no guarantee that it's going to work out. And so I do think you need to be able to hold on to those patent rights to either commercialize them directly or to license them to fund that R&D. So I think I like to call it the unlocking or the opening of the patent vault. I don't see that happening in deep tech.
I thought even in the US there is only one Elon Musk, right? I mean that not everyone.
Actually, it was my quick comment to that is it wasn't a very effective move. It did a bit of marketing for the company, which might have created some hype, but effectively there was no net benefit of doing that. They still continued filing patents. All right, so we have run out of time. I'd like to thank all of you for listening in, and I'd like to thank all our speakers for joining in this session and sharing your insights. Thank you. Can we have a round of applause, please, for that?